My brother sold our family vineyard and scammed me out of $50,000. Then he showed up broke and homeless. I, F29, come from a long line of vineyard owners in California's Napa Valley. Our family's winemaking legacy stretches back over a century, beginning with my great great grandfather, Giuseppe, who immigrated from a small village in Tuscany in 1906. With nothing but a few vine cuttings and a wealth of knowledge passed down through generations, he planted the seeds of what would become Rossi family vineyards. Growing up, I was enchanted by the rows of grapevines stretching as far as the eye could see. I loved helping my parents during harvest time, the sweet scent of ripe grapes filling the air as we worked together under the warm California sun. My father, Antonio, 58, would often tell us stories of Giuseppe's struggles and triumphs as we worked, instilling in us a deep appreciation for our heritage. My younger brother, Alan, M27, never shared my enthusiasm. Where I saw beauty and tradition in the vineyard, he saw monotony and constraint. While I eagerly absorbed every bit of knowledge about soil composition and fermentation processes, Alan dreamed of skyscrapers and stock markets. Our mother, Sophia, 55, tried to nurture both our interests, but it was clear that Alan felt like an outsider in our wine-centric family. As teenagers, our different paths became even more apparent. I joined the local 4-H club, entering my homegrown grapes in county fairs and even winning a few ribbons. Alan, on the other hand, started a small business reselling sneakers online, always with an eye on the profit margin. Our parents tried not to show favoritism, but I could sense their worry about the future of the vineyard if Alan didn't come around. After high school, I went to UC Davis to study viticulture and enology, throwing myself into learning everything I could about the science and art of winemaking. Alan headed to NYU for a finance degree, eager to immerse himself in city life. During those years, our paths diverged even further. I spent my summers interning at renowned wineries in France and Italy, while Alan landed prestigious internships on Wall Street. When I returned home after graduation, ready to take on a management role in our family vineyard, I met Tom. He was a local boy who'd gone away to study agriculture and returned to start an organic farming consultancy. We bonded over our shared love for the land and passion for sustainable practices. Tom understood my deep connection to the vineyard in a way few others did, and we were married 2 years later in a beautiful ceremony among the vines. Alan attended the wedding, but I could see he felt out of place. He'd been living in New York since graduation, working for a hedge fund and only visiting home for major holidays. Each time he came back, the distance between him and the rest of the family seemed to grow. Everything changed when our grandmother, Nonna Maria, passed away 5 years ago. She had been the family matriarch, the keeper of old recipes and family secrets, and a bridge between the old world and the new. Her loss hit us all hard, but it also brought an unexpected twist to our family dynamic. In her will, Nonna left Alan and me each 50 acres of prime vineyard land. I was overwhelmed with gratitude and immediately started planning how to honor her legacy by cultivating my plot with a blend of traditional methods and innovative sustainable practices. Alan, however, saw it as his ticket to financial independence. He started talking about selling his share almost before the dust had settled on Nonna's grave. Our parents were devastated. This land had been in the family for generations, cultivated with love and sweat by our ancestors. The idea of selling it to some faceless corporation or wealthy hobbyist was unthinkable to them. They tried to persuade Alan to reconsider, offering to buy his share themselves if he really didn't want it. But Alan was adamant. He said he needed the capital to make his Alan in the finance world, to prove he could succeed outside the family business. In the end, they couldn't stop him. Alan sold his 50 acres to a luxury resort developer, using the money to move into a swanky Manhattan apartment and invest in some high-risk, high-reward ventures. He promised he'd make the family proud, show us all that there was more to life than playing in the dirt, as he put it. I threw myself into developing my vineyard, partly to distract myself from the pain of Alan's decision. Tom and I worked tirelessly, experimenting with organic farming methods and lesser-known grape varieties. We wanted to create something unique, a wine that told the story of our land and our family. It was hard work, with many late nights poring over soil reports and many early mornings tending to delicate vines. But every small success, Every positive review from a wine critic made it all worthwhile. Meanwhile, Alan's calls home became less and less frequent. When he did call, he'd talk about the exciting deals he was working on, the important people he was meeting. But there was always an undercurrent of stress in his voice, a hint that things might not be as rosy as he was painting them. Then, last year, Alan called me out of the blue. He sounded excited, almost manic, as he told me he'd discovered some old property documents in Nonna's things. According to him, these papers showed that his 50 acres had actually included an additional 10 acres that were currently part of my vineyard. He said he wanted to make things right and asked for $100,000 as compensation. I was stunned. It didn't make sense. Our family had meticulous records of the property boundaries, updated with every generation. And why would Nonna have divided the land unevenly? But Alan was insistent, saying his lawyer advised him he had a strong case. I didn't want to believe my brother would lie to me, but I also couldn't ignore the nagging doubt in my gut. I reluctantly agreed to pay him $50,000 up front while I looked into his claims. Tom was furious when he found out, saying we should have investigated before handing over any money. But I felt guilty for how much easier my life had been compared to Alan's struggles in New York. Maybe this was my way of evening the scales a bit. Over the next few months, I discreetly researched our property history. I spent hours in the county records office, tracing the boundaries of our land. Back through decades of deeds and surveys. I even hired a surveyor to double-check the current boundaries. Everything confirmed what I had suspected. Alan's claims were completely baseless. But that wasn't all I discovered. Through some careful questioning of family friends and business associates, I learned that Alan had actually sold his 50 acres to the resort developer over a year ago, long before he came to me with his property boundary story. He had hidden this from the family, probably knowing how hurt our parents would be. I was shocked and deeply hurt. How could my own brother, the boy I'd grown up with, try to scam me like this? I wanted to confront him immediately, but I held back. Part of me hoped there was some explanation, some misunderstanding that could make this all make sense. The opportunity to get answers came at our annual family reunion last month. It's always a big affair, with relatives coming from all over to gather at the main house. There's wine tasting, of course, and big meals featuring old family recipes. It's usually a time of joy and reconnection, but this year I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach as I waited for Alan to arrive. When he finally showed up, he worked the room like a politician, full of charm and big stories. He regaled our cousins with tales of high-stakes deals and rubbing elbows with New York elites. I tried to stay calm, to find a moment to pull him aside and talk privately. But then I overheard him talking to our teenage cousins, telling them they should follow his example instead of wasting their lives stomping grapes like cavemen. Something in me snapped. All the hurt and anger I'd been holding back came rushing out. I stormed over and shouted, "That's rich coming from someone who sold their heritage for a quick buck and then tried to scam their own sister." The room went dead silent. All eyes were on us as I laid out everything. The false property claims, the hidden land sale, the $50,000 he took from me under false pretenses. Alan tried to deny it at first, but as I presented the evidence, his face went pale. Our parents were shocked and devastated. Mom started crying, while Dad just stood there, his face a mask of disbelief and disappointment. Alan eventually stormed out, but not before yelling that we were all backwards hicks who didn't understand his ambitions. In the aftermath, most of the family has taken my side. My parents are heartbroken but grateful I exposed Alan's lies before he could take advantage of anyone else. Tom is proud of me for standing up for myself, but thinks I should have handled it more privately. Part of me feels guilty for humiliating Alan in front of the whole family. Maybe if I had confronted him one-on-one first, things wouldn't have blown up so badly. But another part of me is still angry at how he tried to manipulate and steal from me. So, Reddit? AETA for exposing my brother's lies so publicly? Should I have found a less dramatic way to address the situation? Update 1. It's been about a month since the blow-up at the family reunion, and to say it's been a roller coaster would be an understatement. First, I want to thank everyone. For their supportive comments and advice. It really helped me process everything and figure out my next steps. The day after the reunion, my parents called a family meeting with just me, Alan, and them. We gathered in the old farmhouse kitchen where we'd had so many family discussions over the years. The tension was palpable as we all took our seats around the worn oak table. Alan tried to spin more lies, claiming he only sold the land because he was in dire financial straits and too ashamed to ask for help. He said the false property claims were a misunderstanding based on something our grandmother had once told him. As he spoke, I could see the desperation in his eyes, the way his hands shook slightly as he gestured. Part of me wanted to believe him, to find some way to excuse his actions. But the evidence was too clear, the betrayal too deep. I wasn't buying it, and neither were our parents. Dad, usually so calm and measured, raised his voice for the first time I can remember. He said he would have helped Alan if he was truly struggling. No questions asked. The hurt in his voice was painful to hear. Mom was quieter, but you could see the disappointment in her eyes as she absently twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit she's had for as long as I can remember. They told Alan he needed to repay me the $50,000 and come clean about everything if he wanted to remain part of the family. It was a harsh ultimatum, but I could see they felt they had no choice. Alan's actions had shaken the very foundation of trust our family was built on. Alan didn't take it well. He stormed out again, accusing us all of ganging up on him. The sound of his car peeling out of the driveway seemed to echo the finality of the moment. He flew back to New York the next day without saying goodbye. We didn't hear from him for 2 weeks. During that time, I threw myself into work at the Vineyard. The vines don't care about family drama, and there was always something that needed doing. I spent long days in the fields, checking the grapes, adjusting irrigation systems, and planning for the upcoming harvest. The physical labor was almost a relief, giving me something concrete to focus on instead of the swirling emotions inside me. Tom was incredibly supportive during this time. He picked up extra slack around the vineyard, handling paperwork and vendor calls so I could have space to process everything. Late at night, when the doubts and what-ifs kept me awake, he'd hold me and remind me that I'd done the right thing, that Alan's actions were his own responsibility. My lawyer friend Sarah helped me draft a formal demand letter to Alan for the $50,000. She warned me that legal action might be necessary if he didn't respond, but I hoped it wouldn't come to that. The idea of dragging our family issues through the courts felt like a final, irrevocable step I wasn't sure I was ready to take. To my surprise, Alan actually responded to the letter. He agreed to repay the money in installments, but asked for 6 months to get his finances in order. I was skeptical but agreed, mostly to avoid dragging this through the courts. Part of me wondered if this was just another stalling tactic, another lie. But I wanted to give him the chance to make things right. Then last week, out of the blue, Alan showed up at the Vineyard. I was in the wine cellar checking on a batch of Cabernet Sauvignon when I heard footsteps on the stairs. I turned, expecting to see Tom or one of our workers, and instead found myself face to face with my brother. He looked terrible. Unshaven, bloodshot eyes, clothes rumpled like he'd been sleeping in his car, which it turns out he had been. The polished New York financier was gone, replaced by a man who looked lost and defeated. Alan broke down right there in the cellar. Between sobs, he confessed everything. He had lost his job in New York months ago after a risky investment went south. Too proud to admit failure, he'd been living off credit cards and payday loans, trying desperately to maintain the illusion of success. The land sale and attempted scam were last-ditch efforts to dig himself out of the hole he'd created. As I listened to him pour out his story, I felt a confusing mix of emotions. There was lingering anger over his betrayal, but also a surge of the protective instinct I'd always felt for my little brother. I remembered the kid who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the teenager who acted tough but cried when he didn't make the basketball team. In the end, I agreed to let him stay in one of the workers' cottages on the vineyard while he gets back on his feet. It's a small, simple place, a far cry from his Manhattan apartment, but it's clean and comfortable. He's going to work for me to repay the $50,000 and learn the business from the ground up. Our parents are cautiously optimistic about this arrangement. They came over for dinner the night after Alan arrived, and I could see the relief in their eyes at having both their children under one roof again. They're glad Alan is home and getting help, but it's clear their trust in him is shattered. Mom hugged him for a long time, tears in her eyes while Dad gave him a gruff pat on the back. It will take a long time to rebuild those relationships. As for me, I'm still processing my feelings. Part of me wants to forgive Alan and help him, to recapture the closeness we had as kids. But another part is wary of being taken advantage of again. The memory of his betrayal is still fresh, and I find myself watching him closely, looking for signs of deception. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time and maintaining clear boundaries. Alan starts work in the vineyard tomorrow, and I'm both nervous and hopeful about how it will go. This is uncharted territory for all of us. I'll keep you all updated as things develop. Thanks again for all your support during this difficult time. Your perspectives have been invaluable in helping me navigate this complex situation. Update 2. It's been 3 months since my last update, and I wanted to share how things have progressed with the Alan situation. True to his word, Alan has been working at the vineyard to repay his debt. He started with basic tasks like pruning vines and cleaning equipment. I half expected him to complain about the physical labor or try to. Talk his way into an office job, but he's surprised me. He's been working harder than some of our regular employees, often staying late to finish tasks without being asked. About a month into his time here, I was working late in the office one night and found Alan in there, poring over some of my old viticulture textbooks. When I asked him about it, he seemed almost embarrassed, like I'd caught him doing something wrong. But then he admitted he was trying to learn more about the business. He said working in the vineyard had given him a new appreciation for what our family has built. This led to some good conversations about our childhood and why we took such different paths. We stayed up late into the night, sharing a bottle of our family's wine and really talking for the first time in years. Alan confessed he always felt overshadowed by me, like he could never measure up in our parents' eyes when it came to the family business. He said he thought he had to make it big in the city to prove himself, to show he could be successful in his own way. I admitted I sometimes resented him for leaving all the family responsibilities to me. There were times I wanted to explore other options, to see what life might be like away from the vineyard. But I felt obligated to stay, to carry on the family legacy. It was the most honest we'd been with each other in years, and it felt like a weight lifting off both our shoulders. As Alan showed more interest in the vineyard operations, I started giving him more responsibilities. He's got a good head for numbers, so I've had him working on our books and helping plan our production schedule. His background in finance has actually been quite useful. He's streamlined some of our accounting processes and identified a few areas where we could be more efficient. He's even come up with some good ideas for modernizing our Allen editing and distribution. Last week, he presented a plan for expanding our online sales and creating a wine club subscription service. I was impressed by the depth of research he'd done and the careful financial projections he'd put together. It was a strange but pleasant feeling to see Alan's business acumen being applied to help our family vineyard rather than compete with it. Our parents have been cautiously rebuilding their relationship with Alan. They still don't fully trust him, and I can see the wariness in their eyes sometimes when he's talking about the business. But they're happy to see him taking an interest in the family legacy. Dad has been spending more time at the vineyard, using it as an opportunity to bond with both of us. He's been teaching Alan some of the more intricate aspects of winemaking, things that can't be learned from books. It hasn't all been smooth sailing. There have been a few arguments, especially when the topic of Alan's New York life comes up. He still has a lot of debt to deal with, and I know he sometimes feels trapped by the situation. There are days when I catch him staring off into the distance, a wistful look in his eyes, and I wonder if he's regretting his decision to come back. We've also had some disagreements about the direction of the business. Alan's ideas, while often good, sometimes clash with the traditional methods we've used for generations. Finding a balance between innovation and tradition has led to some heated discussions. As for me, I'm still working on fully forgiving Alan. The betrayal cut deep, and it's hard to completely let go of that hurt. There are moments when I catch myself doubting his motives or questioning his commitment. But seeing him work so hard and genuinely try to make amends has softened my anger. We're slowly rebuilding our sibling relationship, and I'm hopeful we can eventually be close again. Tom has been a great support through all of this. He's acted as a mediator during some of our arguments and has helped Alan adjust to life on the vineyard. He's also been a sounding board for me, helping me work through my conflicting emotions about the situation. There's still a long road ahead. Alan has a lot to prove, not just to me and our parents, but to himself as well. And we all have work to do in rebuilding the trust that was broken. But for the first time in months, I'm feeling optimistic about our family's future. The harvest season is approaching, and it will be the first one with Alan fully involved in the process. It will be a test for all of us, but also an opportunity to come together as a family in a way we haven't in years. I'm both nervous and excited to see how it goes. I'll update again if there are any major developments. Thank you all for your continued support and advice throughout this journey. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share a significant development in the situation with Alan. Over the past few months, Alan has continued to work hard at the vineyard and learn about the wine business. He's shown a real aptitude for it, especially on the business and Alan eating side. His financial background, combined with his newfound knowledge of winemaking, has brought a fresh perspective to our operations. We successfully made it through the harvest season, which was as challenging and rewarding as I expected. There were long days and nights of hard work, but also moments of joy and camaraderie. I'll never forget the sight of Alan, covered in grape juice and exhausted, but grinning from ear to ear as we finished pressing the last batch of grapes. It was in those moments that I truly felt like I had my brother back. Our parents have been spending more time at the vineyard too. Dad has taken on the role of mentor to Alan, sharing the wisdom he's gained over decades in the business. Mom has been helping out with the tasting room, charming visitors with her warm personality and vast knowledge of our wines. It's been heartwarming to see our family coming together again. Last month, an unexpected opportunity arose that has the potential to change everything. A neighboring vineyard came up for sale, a beautiful 40-acre property with some unique grape varieties we've been interested in cultivating. The Moretti family, who owned it, decided to retire and move closer to their grandchildren in Oregon. It was a perfect chance to expand our business, but the timing wasn't great financially for us to take on such a big investment. To my surprise, Alan came to me with a proposal. He had been saving most of his wages and had also managed to sell some investments he had left from his New York days. He suggested we pool our resources and buy the property together as equal partners. The idea of going into business with Alan, given our history, was both exciting and terrifying. I was hesitant at first, given our past issues. The memory of his betrayal was still there, a shadow at the back of my mind. But as we discussed the idea, I could see the passion in his eyes, the genuine excitement about building something together. It reminded me of when we were kids, dreaming up grand plans for the future. After a lot of discussion with Tom and our parents, I decided to take the risk. We drew up a detailed contract with help from Sarah, our lawyer friend, making sure everything was clear and fair. The agreement included clauses about profit sharing, decision-making processes, and even what would happen if one of us wanted to sell our share in the future. It felt strange to be so formal with my own brother, but after everything that had happened, we both agreed it was necessary. We closed on the property last week, and I have to admit, it feels good to be working alongside my brother as a true partner. The day we signed the papers, we walked through the vineyards together, talking about our plans for the future. Alan is throwing himself into plans for the new vineyard with an enthusiasm I've never seen from him before. He's already talking about experimenting with some lesser-known Italian grape varieties, a nod to our family's heritage. Our parents are thrilled to see us working together and continuing the family legacy. Dad even teared up a bit when we told them about the purchase, saying it was like a dream come true. Mom insisted on hosting a big family dinner to celebrate, cooking all our favorite dishes from childhood. Of course, we still have our moments of tension and disagreement. The hurt from Alan's betrayal hasn't completely faded, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust him 100% again. There are times when old doubts creep in, when I find myself watching him closely, looking for signs of deception. But we're both committed to making this work, both as a business and as siblings. The coming months will be busy as we integrate the new property into our operations and prepare for the next growing season. There's so much to do. Hiring additional staff, updating equipment, planning our production schedule. But for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future of our family business. I don't know what the future holds, but for now, I'm cautiously optimistic. This shared project feels like a new chapter for our family, a chance to heal old wounds and build something meaningful together. Only time will tell how it all works out, but I'm ready for the journey ahead. Thank you all for your support and advice throughout this complicated situation. Your perspectives have been invaluable in helping me navigate these choppy waters. I'll update again if there are any major developments in our vineyard adventure.